All right, hi folks. Hopefully we've got folks rejoining from our board meeting. We might have a few additional folks joining for the annual meeting. We'll give it another minute or two before we jump in, but thanks for being here. All right. Good set of folks here. And just as a note as well, we are recording this for the so for folks who couldn't join here live, they'll be able to review it after the fact and get a sense of what we've been up to in the last year and what's on the docket for the year ahead. So just as a heads up. Good. Okay, great. No one's in the waiting room. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Looks like we've got a great crop of folks here. And if you do have questions as we go throughout, it'd be great to drop those in the chat. I'll keep an eye on those and try to kind of address kind of as we go along. We do have a pretty full docket, so there might not be a ton of time at the back end for Q&A, but if we can't resolve questions as we go, we'll definitely ensure we follow up after the fact. But again, if you do have questions, chat's a great place for those. But first off, thanks for being here. We're excited to share what we've been up to over the past year, talk a little bit about kind of things that are currently in the hopper, and then also jump in and talk kind of what we have in store for the year ahead. So again, thanks for being here. So I'm Nick Bennett. I'm the chair of the Trails and Greenways Council. For folks that aren't familiar, and this is old news for many, but hopefully, or perhaps there are some who it is less so, the Trails and Greenways Council represents sort of the collective trail stewardship community in Vermont. That represents over 50,000 individual members. When you look across our organizations, we log collectively over 100,000 hours of volunteer time. We manage and maintain, at this point, probably over 8,000 miles of trail across those organizations and support a huge portion of the $2 billion outdoor recreation economy in Vermont. And critically, our organizations, many of them work closely in partnership with private landowners who steward close to, if not over, 3/4 of public access trails that are on private land. So a critical role the council and our members play. We'll talk a little bit about that in some of our advocacy priorities. And lastly, but certainly not least, we partner closely with the public land managers, most closely the Agency of Natural Resources and the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation, not only to help manage trails on public land, but critically to advise on trails related matters as well. So just a little background on the council. Certainly a lot more is available on our website. So we are, at least from the board standpoint, the council certainly comprises more generally our member organizations, but our board currently listed here again, I'm the current chair. And then we've got, well, you'll hear from many of these folks today, but all of whom have played a pretty vital role in helping shape the council, not only over the last 12 months, many of them have been involved much longer. So did just want to give a call out to certainly our board members, and then you'll hear in a few minutes talking about the really critical role Sharon Plum, our program manager, who's the council's only staff member, has played in a lot of our progress. And then we work closely too with Maidstone Public Relations, Jill Sudhoff-Gurin, to help guide and support a lot of our work in the State House. So that's who the council is when it comes to people, although we certainly consider ourselves the sum of our members. What we're here to today enter the annual meeting. So one thing I'll note, the board had a lot of conversation about whether to host it. Last year. If some folks may remember, we had an in-person annual meeting, and the year before we did as well. At Ascutney last year was at North Branch Nature Center. We debated having another in-person annual meeting this year. We actually, given that we had hosted, which we'll talk about, an accessibility summit in January, and we're putting a lot of energy into the upcoming conference on parks, on the recreation conference in September. We felt that another in-person meeting was a little bit of a stretch for us operationally, and B, a lot to ask folks to be present in person, although huge benefits to being collectively together. The one upside to being virtual, particularly on a beautiful day like this, at least is that folks who are unable, well, A, it facilitates attendance across the state, and B, if for folks unable to attend, again, while we're recording, they'll be able to review this after the fact. So some upsides, but we also want to acknowledge that there is a huge benefit to being together. In terms of the goals we do have for today, though, we'll recap major accomplishments over the last year, what the council has been working on and been able to achieve. We'll talk a little bit about some of the sort of status and where we're headed with some of the legislative priorities, with both our legislative priorities and some specific legislative pieces of legislation and policies that we've been working on. We'll talk about a trail accessibility hub, which has been a huge project for the council over the last year and is ramping up this summer as well. So get a chance to recap what's been going on that front. And then we did carve out some time. We want to hear from folks. It's, again, even though we're not in person, I wanted to carve out some time to hear about needs, concerns, and opportunities from folks that we don't hear from potentially, or at our regular board meetings, just to ensure that as we shape up our docket and plans for 2025, that we're well informed by our members and those in the trails community. And then certainly we want to we'll propose a slate or elect our slate of 2025 board of directors at the end of the meeting here as well. So with that, what's our agenda to accomplish those goals? So as I mentioned, we're kind of in the housekeeping and the intro part of this, which will take us through the first quarter hour. We'll then cover a year in review, and I'll split that up with Sharon Plum, our program manager, to talk a little bit about broadly what the council's been up to. We'll then have Katrin Maloney, our treasurer, provide a treasurer report, a look back on the financials. Carolyn Lawrence, our secretary, will then talk about membership, specifically over the last year. We'll then hand it over to Tommy O'Connor, who runs our legislative committee, and Jill Sudofker, and our support on the advocacy and policy side, to talk about legislative activities over the last year. Then we'll hand it over to Claire Polfus, our recreation program manager for FPR, to give FPR's report for the year that was and some of the things in motion for the year ahead. And then we'll pause and have some time again for the sort of your input, member insights, questions, that type of thing. So open it up around 11:30 if we're on time. We'll then wrap with the board elections and a few other just sort of looking ahead, what's in store for the council. And again, if you do have questions or comments or things, feel free to drop those in the chat, because that'll help us keep track of them as we go along. And one last, so these are housekeeping. We could have started off with these, but before we jump into the body of our topics, just one thing that'd be great if you can, in 30 seconds or less. I think we're going to try to actually go around the horn and do this very quickly with folks, if they can stay off them, if they can hop off mic, so get a chance to know who's actually here. And if I pull open our screens, we can quickly say who you are, where you're from, just town and organization, and in one sentence, why you're here today. So just very quickly, this is designed to be pretty succinct. So we've got about 8 to 10 minutes. So again, I'll try to call on folks, because that way I can hopefully keep track. But if I miss you at the end, let us know. And maybe I will do board folks first, and then we'll transition to attendees. That'll give folks who were not necessarily prepared to speak a chance to hop on camera. But if you're unable to go off mic, that's fine too. We'll just give it a minute or two. But why don't I go ahead? I'm gonna just go on my screen with who I can see. Tommy, if you want to jump in first.
Thanks, Nick. Tommy O'Connor, Executive Director of the Vermont ATV Sportsmen's Association. I am Vice Chair here at VTGC, and I also serve as the motorized rep for VTGC on VORAG, the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, all that great stuff. Here, again, my area of expertise for the group is legislative stuff, so just looking forward to sharing about that and learning how we can better be your voice in Montpelier.
Great. How about Carolyn?
Hi, everyone. I'm Carolyn. I am a recreation planner with Sierra Planning and Design and the Secretary of Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. I also support the membership committee, so you'll hear from me more later today. I'm really looking forward to hearing what support, similar to what Tommy said, what support we can bring our members across the state.
Awesome. How about Abby?
Morning, everyone. My name is Abby Long. I'm the Executive Director for Kingdom Trails. I serve in a regional position or seat on the board for VTGC. I also serve alongside Tommy Vorek and involved in the strategic planning committee and again with Tommy with the legislative committee.
Great. And Claire and Becca, you're on my next as I go through.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Pulfis. I serve as the Recreation Program Manager for the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, and am the liaison for VTGC. I'm based out of Montpelier, but I live in Sheffield, and I am really interested in that last portion of the agenda and hearing from the members about their ideas and concerns.
Thanks. I'm Becca
Great.
Washburn, Director of Lands Administration and Recreation, also the Chair of VOREC. I have worked for the Forest Parks and Rec Department for about 7 years now, live in Middlesex, and love recreation. That's why I'm here.
Nice. How about Katrin?
Hello, everyone. I'm Katrin Maloney. I'm board member with Slate Valley Trails and on the Belmont Trail Advisory Committee and serve as treasurer for VTGC and also chair the Strategic Planning Committee. And I love trails, and that's why I'm here to help sort of move things forward in Vermont.
Nice. How about Monica?
Hi, I'm Monica Raymond, and I am on the board of directors of the Vermont Horse Council, which is an all-volunteer organization. And I joined the board of VTGC just a year ago, so I feel like I'm still in a learning mode. Jeff Nugent and I, he's also on the board, are data gurus, so we've been helping with organizing and the data on membership and upgrading the membership database, and we continue to work on that. So
Great. Awesome. How about Rachel?
Here we go. All right, sorry. My name is Rachel Batts. I am representing on the board at the town of Dorset, Vermont. I'm the outdoor recreation director for the town. And like everyone else is saying, I just really want to keep in knowing what's going on with trails throughout the whole state and keeping in line with that and knowing what's going on with other people and having those updates. So I really appreciate all of that. Thank you so much.
How about Mariah?
Mariah Keggy, and I'm with Sydney Wassity. I'm a trail designer and planner, and we also build trails. So we're trail contractors, and I'm also on the board of VTGC and serve in support of Trails Committee. And I'm also on the board of the Professional Trail Builders Association, and sort of one of the things that I aim to do with VTGC, with most folks here, is also, bringing our expertise to the table, and specifically for me, bringing that expertise from outside of Vermont into Vermont, and serving as a liaison in that way. And also, as Katrin said, I just love trails.
Kind of a table stakes. How about Jeff?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Nugent. I'm on the board of VTGC. My full-time job is working as a GIS planner at the Wyndham Regional Commission in Brattleboro. And I'm one of the 2 regional reps on the board. Like Monica, I'm a fairly new board member, been here a year. And one thing I'm looking forward to getting out of the meeting is just a summary of what we've been doing this past year, because it's been a heck of a lot. And tough to keep track of all the great work that the council does.
Awesome. And then how about to Sharon, and then we'll go to other folks at large.
Sure. I'm Sharon Plum, and I live in East Montpelier, and I started working here about 2 years ago. At the annual meeting that I attended was my first day, so it's fun to kind of come full circle. I love trails. It's where I feel most at home, and where I got my start as a trail worker many years ago, and it's fun to be involved in all aspects of trail. So I really am curious, and I love to help, and it's a great role for me to do that.
Great, awesome. How about Angus?
Hey everybody, Angus McCusker. I am the Belmont Trail director. Belmont Trail is a project at the beginning of this year of both Vermont Hudson Trails and VEMBA. So yeah, I am working closely with folks like Nick and RJ with Vermont Hudson Trails. And I think I am here mostly, I appreciate all the work that's being done in Montpelier and looking for updates, how that directly impacts us.
Awesome. How about Keegan?
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everybody. I'm Keegan Tierney. I'm the field director at the Green Mountain Club. So just like to pay attention to what's going on out there.
Great. And Joe Fox?
Hey all, Joe Fox. I'm the outdoor recreation manager at the Northern Forest Center. It's a regional nonprofit based in Concord, New Hampshire that serves the northern tier of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. We do a lot of community, rural economic development work and see trails connecting communities and bringing people together, connecting them with nature. And yeah, we feel that trails are a vital part of a healthy community, and happy to be here and learn how we can support your work in the state.
Awesome. I'm going to go to folks who don't have their cameras on, so we'll see if they're able to jump in on audio. But how about Kenzie?
I'm here, I promise. Kenzie Bruner, Stowe Trails Partnership. I'm here mostly to hear about what's been happening for the last year and learn what's on the docket for the years ahead. VTGC has been doing some amazing work that I've been lucky to be associated with, so looking to hear a lot about what's going on.
And Greg, Western.
Hello, Greg Western, Cross Vermont Trail, and same as everyone, in my day-to-day, I'm very focused on extremely small things, so it's really reassuring to know that the council is there looking at the bigger picture where folks can connect with each other, so thumbs up.
Awesome, thanks, Greg. How about Ellen? We'll see if Ellen can hop off mute or not. But we'll circle back if she does come off mute. How about Lauren?
Hello, all. I'm Lauren Pyle. I use her pronouns, and I'm the Outdoor Recreation Grants Manager for the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. I'm here because one of the grants programs I administer is the Recreational Trails Program. So I always love to stay up to date about what's happening in the trails world.
Awesome. Cool. And how about Kara Stacks?
Hi, I'm Cara Sachs. I'm not sure how long I'm able to stay on. I am from Vermont Center for Independent Living, ADA specialist, and have not been able to be out on anything other than smooth pavement in a long time, and hopefully going to be able to change that. Yeah, because I'm a full-time wheelchair user, so trying to figure out ways of making that happen, both for me and options for other people. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Great. And then Jackie, I'm not sure if it's Jackie Casino or Jackie Dagger.
Everyone, this is Jackie Dagger. I am actually in the car driving, so I won't come off camera, but I serve as the program manager for the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, and work very closely with the council. As you heard, that we have 2 steering committee members and Becca as our chair. And our primary goal is to strengthen the connections between outdoor recreation assets and the benefits that come from outdoor recreation. So I'll be joining Claire and Becca soon, but thanks for the introduction or the opportunity to introduce myself.
Awesome. Well, be safe, Jackie. That's a little scary if you're driving coming off you, but thank you for joining us. And then Ellen, I didn't see Ellen come off you, but feel free to drop your name and details in the chat too if you have an opportunity. And I think that covers everybody. Yeah, getting nods. Great, cool. So let's go ahead and flip back over to your interview. So I'll kick off, as I noted, the first kind of a couple of slides here, and then I'll hand it over to Sharon, who does most of the real work. But to talk a little bit about operations, and I think that the story overall is one of continuing to strengthen it and really build up the capacity of the council, and doing that through a couple of different ways. One is, as Sharon noted, we were fortunate enough to hire Sharon as our program manager now 2 years ago. And I think, Sharon has really hit her stride in the past year in terms of taking, as some folks have noted, take some time to really get up to speed with everything going on in the trails community and the role of the council and our partners and everything else. So I think year 2 of that, of Sharon's role here, has really been able to kind of hit stride and evidenced as projects like, which we'll talk about in a second, the Trail Accessibility Hub. So huge thanks to all her hard work. And I think that's, I think looking in the future, we will sort of pre and post date the council as being able to have had actually paid staff, which significantly extends our ability to accomplish things. So it's a huge, just important for us to highlight. Did want to talk through Trail Accessibility Hub, which I think Sharon will cover a little bit more later, but that was a huge, grant that the council was awarded last summer, and the work started in the middle of last summer. But the council, I think it really articulated and highlighted the role that the council can play, and we'll talk a little bit later about what's ahead with the VTGC when we talk about the strategic planning work that's currently underway. But the Accessibility Hub was an opportunity for us to engage and really sort of use the council's position to bring together multiple partners and work orchestrating a grant that's aiming to improve access to trails across water trails, adaptive mountain bike trails, and pedestrian trails to improve, just increase the quantity and improve the quality of those experiences across the state. It really articulated the role that the council as a convener and as sort of the central aggregator of organizations can play. So we'll cover that in a little bit more detail, but a lot of our activity over the past year and Sharon's efforts have been devoted to really building up the hub, which our grant funding through which we're generous to receive a grant from the Borak Community Grant Program that will run through this year. And so part of the activity currently ongoing is developing the sort of long-term planning post Borak Community Grant as to what that accessibility hub looks like and how it evolves in the future. Another piece, and this kind of gets into the nuts and bolts, but that getting a major grant also sort of forced the council to develop more firm policies and procedures, and as we grow as an organization, also improving the professionalism of the council. So we are deeply grateful that Katrin Maloney, as secretary, has put in an enormous amount of time in improving the processes and procedures that the council follows. Generally, a lot of those are related to financials, but we now have a manual that really highlights exactly how we do things, particularly on the financial management side of things, which is super important. Has been prerequisite for really working with this significant grant for the Trail Accessibility Hub, but also has just improved and streamlined the way that we work generally. So huge thanks there. We are working with contracted bookkeeper as well to be able to manage all of our reporting and filing taxes and things like that. So again, just kind of nuts and bolts, but highlights the professionalism of the council. Other piece, just an operations side of things, we've again working at this is our perhaps third or fourth year working with Jill Sotofgern of Maidstone Support, or Maidstone Consulting. She's our eyes, ears, and voice many times in the State House and helps ensure that we're really staying on top of topics that matter to recreation and to trails, and also getting us in front of committees when appropriate and helping craft and develop legislation. So again, thanks on that front, and that relationship again continues to strengthen in terms of Jill deeply understanding how the council works, what our priorities are, and being able to work in the State House on a day-to-day basis to make sure that those are both voiced and that we're cultivating relationships with legislators. So a big portion of our time and energy is put into really having that presence in the State House. And then the last bucket on the operational side of things is to emphasize, and we'll hear from many of the committees later, or I'll highlight them in a second, really leaning into realizing that the trying to shift the boards to some degree to being more in terms of working committees, and having those committees have the latitude and capacity to pursue projects and efforts and share back with the board, engage the broader board where needed, but realizing that the board itself, without those sort of functional committees, couldn't keep up with all the demands and opportunities that are out there for us to be working on. So big effort and huge thanks to the committee chairs for developing charters and organizing those meetings outside of the board meetings, and helping develop goals and priorities for the individual committees that now comprise a lot of the board. So big effort of the last year has been establishing those committees, which I'll talk about in a second. So on the committee front, as we've introduced some of these folks, we have and it's now been a relatively long-standing, but policy and legislative committee led by Tommy, responsible for developing our policy agenda, also overseeing the activities of Jill in the State House and kind of being the direct liaison with their efforts, providing guidance and input, kind of so as noted, being really the contact and the go-to to perform those, and then also coordinating testimony. So working across members, both the board and then outside the board, to really recruit and to identify opportunities to bring in the trail community to speak to matters and pieces of legislation that are important. This is definitely one of the core committees and has been one for quite a while. One of the things I'll note too as we go through these, if folks listening, even if many of these committees, if you're not on the board, the membership is not exclusive to board members. So if you have a passion for any of these particular topics, please reach out, and we'd love to have, in many cases, the most critical thing on these committees is not necessarily even experience, but just passion and commitment to be engaged. So if any of these strike you as interesting, let us know. We'd be happy to talk about potentially joining one of these committees. So Tommy's done a fabulous job this year, and he and Jill will talk a little bit more about the work that committee's been up to. On the membership side of things, really vital to the role of the council as both needing to speak on behalf of and understand the needs of the community. So membership is critical. Carolyn's been leading that committee. It involves both marketing and engaging members, and then communicating with them and hearing from members as well. So really, really important. We'll hear about progress over the past year. On the trails side, we are the Trails and Greenways Council. So the Trails Committee is critically involved. We have an official role as a partner in advising on the Vermont trail system. And so that involves what organizations or trails should, as they request membership or participation. There's a technical role that the council plays, and the Trails Committee is lead on that. As we'll talk about, the Trails Committee has also been playing a really critical role in the update to that Vermont trail system. So for technical trails people, the Trails Committee is the place to go, and Mariah's been helping lead that over the past year. We've set up also a ad hoc committee, which perhaps will morph over time, but on strategic planning. One of the real needs as this council has gone through a rapid period of evolution is to do some really committed long-term thinking and planning about where we go from here. And Katrin Maloney's been driving that, and we're working now with a consultant, to Abby Harlow, to develop the planning process and leading us through that. We've received a grant too from Vermont Community Foundation to support that work, and that'll be taking place over the next couple of months and kind of through much of this calendar year, but really vital to the long-term future of the council. And then the last committee, which we have not yet established, but the board it identified a desire and a need to create a committee on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and knowing that's a cross-cutting value to the trails community. It's deeply connected to our Trail Accessibility Hub work. So something that we intend to work on, or will likely be working on in the future, possibly shaped by our strategic planning work, is to expand committee representation into that area. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Sharon to talk about our work on communications this past year.
Great. Thanks so much, Nick. And a year ago, it's hard to believe, but we had been using the same logo that we had since the early 90s. You can see it there in the bottom right. And they did a great job when they designed it to represent all of the different kinds of trail users out there, motorized and non-motorized. And we decided it was time, as we were going to be building a new website and a new e-news, that we take a look at our logo as well. So we hired Stride Communications, and about a year ago, we were in the process of selecting that logo, and we had a engaged process with both the board, and we sent out choices to membership, and people voted, and you can see there our new logo. So that is now what we use in Constant Contact to put out e-news, and they use the same colorways in our new website. And it was a little bit like building a ship as you're sailing it. I was, again, new to the board new to the staff, as we were deciding what kind of information needed to be on the website, what kind of information needed to go out through e-news, and writing content, all to try to launch the website in the summer. So it went live in August, along with the logo, and we have been using it ever since, and it's very popular. The website, we get about 1,500 visitors a month, and it's fun to look at Google Analytics and see when there's blips. When we hosted webinars this spring for the Trail Accessibility Hub, we'd see big blips in the website. And when the legal trails issue came up, we decided right away that we needed to get a page up. We partnered with FPR. We got a page up, and immediately that was the go-to source for the public that we saw. Anyway, lots of folks using it to learn and try to understand that complicated situation. I'm fighting a little cold here, so forgive my tickle here. We put out 33 e-newses in the past 12 months. And they go almost to 600 recipients. And we have a pretty good open rate, which is awesome. It's fairly high for the nonprofit industry. I think we try hard not to flood people with too much information and give them pertinent, relevant, and timely information that's based on what is happening with policy, news in the trails world, funding sources, reminding people of dates, and also trying to highlight some of the organizations that make up our membership, and case studies that can highlight some of the programming that we are doing. Some of the communications is also, just emails that come in that have interesting questions. Sometimes I know where to find the answers, and sometimes I reach out to the board. You are all so knowledgeable, and none of this could happen without our hardworking board. And I tap them and FPR, and other sources as well when questions come up. Sometimes those questions lead to new communications. So for example, I received a call recently from Manchester Equinox Preservation Trust, and they manage a lot of trails that TNC is also part of down in Manchester, and Emerald Ash Borer has arrived. And there's a lot of ash along the trails there. And as y'all know, when emerald ash borer gets into an ash tree, it's pretty quick that they die, and the limbs come down. They're big limbs, they come down quickly. So it's a safety issue. So I worked with UVM Extension and FPR staff to get together the information needed to put out some information through the e-news and develop a new website page on that. So our partnerships are really a big piece of what provide the information, and also help me indicate like which pages are the most important that we need to put together, so that people have the information that they are looking for. It has been interesting with the Trail Accessibility Hub that those pages are often the most visited on the website. So we're an active program. People want to know what we're doing, and they get a lot of visitation. That and legal trails have been the big pages. I think that's it on communications, unless anyone has any questions about that. So now to go on to education and networking. One of my favorite parts about the position is just all of the groups that we get to network with. There's so many trail organizations that depend upon our resources, everything from the smallest local trail group that has no staff and is all volunteer driven and gets great work done, all the way up to the big players like Catamount Trail, Velomont, Green Mountain Club. And all of those groups, whether they are motorized, non-motorized, horse, pedestrian, they all have different needs, but often the same goal: to get people outside safely on trails that are publicly accessible and well maintained. So I was part of helping pull together the second trail symposium in the fall. That was wonderful. That held at Killington. We'll be going back there this coming fall on October 8th and 9th. We had about 130 folks and a lot of different workshops, again, across that spectrum that reach different kinds of trail organizations, as well as the recreation and parks community. The Trail Accessibility Hub, we also held a summit in January. We were noticing through the assessment work that we did and the networking with the disabilities community that it would be really smart to bring people together from those organizations, publicly managed trails through the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, FPR, local groups, professional trail builders, and the disabilities community together to hear about our work through the hub and what we're planning for the coming year, and listen to them about what they envision for the future. And the response was outstanding. We offered a lunch. It was a full, solid day up in Bolton, who donated the Timberline Lodge. And more than 60 people representing over 30 different organizations came. So it was definitely a highlight of the year and a great way to kick off 2025. From there followed our webinar series. And while these webinars were focused on the Trail Accessibility Hub, it was a really good indicator that that type of networking and information sharing could be a way that the VTGC helps to bring forward Vermont-specific information to a large spread of trails organizations. Each webinar, we offered 4. 3 of them were, I'm sorry, 2 were offered by our partners through the Trail Accessibility Hub, and 2 were offered by the UVM Center for Disabilities and Community Inclusion, and one, Cara, who's on here today, by Vermont Center for Independent Living. And they were great. We had over 80 people register for each one and about 30 plus that came to each one. And a lot of folks were from Vermont, but many came from around the country too, because it was advertised through American Trails. So that was pretty cool to see. Lastly, I'm collaborating with Vermont Recreation Parks Association, and we're co-hosting, and we've renamed the conference. The other name, which I won't repeat now, was a little bit of a mouthful. So we've come up with a simplified name. We put out an RFP in about January, and over 60 proposals came in, which is wonderful, and 25 of them had an accessibility theme. So Thursday of the summit will have about half of the workshops will have an accessibility focus. Some of them will also be on Wednesday, and we really worked hard as a committee to try and have a wonderful spread of types of workshops that would support the trails, parks, and recreation community. And this year, we're also adding some speed sessions. We've shortened the workshops to be 60 minutes in length, which opened up some time in the afternoon for 30-minute speed sessions, where maybe a presenter doesn't have a full 60-minute allotment, but there's a really interesting topic that we'd like to offer. So that'll be fun to look forward to. We are also trying in that for the conference to reduce the cost. So I'll have more information on that in a few weeks, but the cost is really quite expensive and prohibited a lot of smaller and volunteer-led organizations from sending staff, both from the trails and the recreation community. We were seeing a drop in those types of participants over the years. So we will likely be teasing out the meals and having people pay a la carte, because that's a huge expense. We also are trying to get more money for ample scholarships. So I'll keep you posted on how that looks, and registration should be live in June. Yeah, and I guess the other part to mention about that, as a more equal partner, this year I'm doing a little bit of work on reaching out to vendors. So that's been interesting, just to see what kind of trail-based vendors might be out there nationally and regionally that could pay to have a table. So that we have both, that helps with cost, but it also helps make the networking sessions when vendors showcase their wares and their knowledge. I think it's had a heavier weight on the recreation side of things, so we're really trying to make sure that the trails world has representation there as well. So stay tuned. Our goal is to get 200 people to the conference each day, which is quite a big jump. I have to get a drink of water. Okay. I think I have one more slide. I'm not sure what I'm talking about.
And
but
Sharon,
when I
are
see
you
it.
able to take, I know your voice is, do you want me to take this one, or are you still good?
No, I can talk. I just need a drink.
All right.
Okay. Lastly, the Trail Accessibility Hub. What a program. It has been wonderful to have something that has very concrete and specific goals to work on with partners. We are a partnership. So VTGC is managing the Trail Accessibility Hub, meaning we receive the money from FPR and then we pay our partners. So the formal partners that we have are Vermont Adaptive, Vermont Mountain Bike Association, Upper Valley Trails Association, Northern Forest Canoe Trail, and who did I miss? Community Geographics, Trail Finder. So and then we have all kinds of partners that are not, getting paid through the grant, but that we are definitely collaborating with to help us spread the word. So backing up, what does the TH do? The goals of it include not actually building any trails this year, but getting the information out there. So if people have the resources when they want to build an accessible trail or any trail and they think, oh, maybe it could be accessible, they don't have to Google anymore and say, how do I do that? And look at 50 million different websites and resources out there. We're trying to consolidate that information and give them one web-based resource where they can find out who are the players in Vermont, what are the standards that can be used, who builds them, how can I learn more? So we have done a great job getting a website up and running. We're deciding what additional pages need to be added to support the community. And a few different ones are underway at this time. We also are conducting assessments, and by that I say we, but I mean everybody else is. They get the field work. I get to hop on now and then. So we're conducting 50 assessments, one in each of the counties of Vermont, at least one. And these are pedestrian, adaptive mountain bike, and aquatic. So the trails that are helpful for getting people from the parking lot down to the water. And at this point, we've completed 28, and they're each valued at about $2,000. So they're not a small thing for an organization to have. And you may ask, like, well, why is it important? Couldn't just a professional go and do that for them? But what we're doing is there's an application process, and then the partners screen the applicant and say, well, how ready are they? Are they an organization that is like, someday it would be nice to build one, or are they much more ready? They've got a site in mind, they have some potential for writing a grant or fundraising in another way. And then that entity will probably rank a little bit higher. We still want everyone else who's interested to apply because it helps us show that there's demand for this. The assessment will then give them super specific details, everything from the parking lot and signage to what needs to be done on the trail to make it so that the intended user can get out and do the activity that they're wanting to do. And it also gives a possible cost estimate of what it might cost for all the materials and the time involved. That assessment can then be used to go and apply for an RTP grant, be used to find private funders or other sources of funding for building out the project. And also support if there's, adaptive mountain bikes, trails tend to be a little bit easier to build than pedestrian. So maybe it's even a project that can be done by volunteers, but then they have the real specific information that needs to be done. The other piece of the work that we're doing, Community Geographics has visited 25 different trails in Trail Finder. Glyden is a gentleman who lives in Maine and has made a business assessing trails. He uses a wheelchair and going to them and actually saying, like, okay, it says it's wheelchair accessible. What does that actually mean when I get out there and want to get out of my car and get to the trail and use it? So providing real detail that's not subjective, but specific detail so that then the intended trail user can seek out the kind of trail that they want to find. So rather than something saying easy, great view, it'll have, what's the slope? What's the aspect? What's the distance? Are there benches? Is there a bathroom? All that information that's much, much easier for the user to find. We've also done some really neat things that have led to other opportunities. So for example, South Hero Land Trust is pictured here on the right. You can see Russ and Randy from Upper Valley Trails Alliance on the left, and then Jenna and a woman or a person from EVM on the right. We went out and did a trail assessment But we also were doing an audit, and South Hero Land Trust had received a big grant from the Land Trust Alliance to develop an audit. And with that, they put together an advisory board, mostly people that had disabilities or had family members with disabilities. And they audited all of the recreation sites in South Hero, not just the trails that the South Hero Land Trust manages. So I had the good fortune to sit on that board, that advisory council with them, and learn how they went through that process. And then, from that comes, wow, this is a great example of a group that's taking it on to not only get a trail assessed and rebuilt, but to look at the whole, all of the recreation in the town. And have a council, and that's something I hadn't heard being done yet. So then that becomes a case study, and I invited them to pitch a proposal for the conference as well, which they did, and they were selected. So pretty neat just to see how one thing leads to another, and then you have something that's a greater benefit for all. And I love looking for that kind of person and relationship and organization that is interested in that. And the trails world is filled with people that like sharing and have good intentions and want to expand the good work that we're all doing. So lastly, we decided as a the hub that it would be great to really invest in the sustainability model. We had marketed or budgeted a small amount of funds to put a model together and thought we would just do it internally. But we decided that it was important enough that this 18-month project shouldn't just end, in December. It took us a while to ramp up. There's a lot of work to do, and we're only scratching the surface. There's so many other things that could be done by a committed group of people from different agencies and organizations across the trails and disabilities community. And we need to find a way to have some version of the hub going forward. So we went through an RFP process and hired a consultant who is doing a fantastic job. I work with her closely, and she's interviewing people from both worlds, the trails world and the disabilities community, and really, looking under all ways that we could continue into the future. What would the goals be? Where would it be housed? How would we find money to do this work? What kinds of projects are needed? Is it that we need more trail builders that can do this work? Is it more that there needs to be better information about what already exists out in the community for people with disabilities to find? So she's really taken a very holistic view. She has international experience with USAID on doing exactly this kind of qualitative research. And her ability to kind of focus on it and not focusing on the program management, which is what would have happened if I was writing the model, has really helped her be objective about what she's seeing. And, from that, at the start, there wasn't a plan to do a survey with the disabilities community, but she really saw a need to find out more from them. I mean, she was interviewing leaders in the community and individuals, but it's like, we really need to have a survey to point to where things could go. So that survey has launched, and it was modeled after the Northern Forest Canoe Trails survey that they did and had really great response for. So we were grateful for them for letting us use the versions of their questions. So that sustainability model will be having a meeting probably sometime in June with representatives from the disabilities community to share out some of the initial data from the interviews and the survey. And that will then be part of what Gretchen uses to pull together a draft report. And she and I and the partners will be presenting at the conference kind of the draft version and taking feedback and wrapping it up by December 31st, hopefully long before then. So we can all take a good holiday. So it's been a great project. I'm going to be sad to see it go, but it has given me a lot of confidence that the VTGC, whatever we choose to do, and whatever kind of educational and networking programming we want to do, we're really well positioned to do that work. And if we choose to focus, we have the bandwidth and the resources that are out there to make things happen. So thanks all. And I really actually want to give kudos to the board too, because I think it was, we voted to apply for and then receive the grant. And I think there were moments of hesitation, and some of that hesitation might still exist. I don't know. I haven't heard that, but it's been just really neat to see people embrace this project statewide, and that we're kind of filling a gap that's out there in a unique way. We're getting recognition. I know Nick might speak to this. He just presented with Jeff at the international, I'm gonna get the acronym wrong. What was it?
International Trail Summit.
Yes, the ITS, International Trail Summit. And so we received a lot of accolades for the Trail Accessibility Hub, because of how we're doing it. And I think if we can take the lessons learned from this and apply it anywhere. And I just want to thank the board again for taking a brave step and making this happen, and for FPR for giving us a nice chunk of money. It really made a huge difference. So I think that's my last slide.
Yeah,
I can't remember, but I'm happy to take questions if we have time.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll keep those cataloged. I don't see any coming through in the chat, but if folks have, they should drop them in there. We'll figure out. We'll weave them back in. But thank you, Sharon, for covering and really exciting to see this work. We'll talk about it as it's definitely going to make the pave a lot of what we do in the year to come. Awesome. Keep this contract up a little bit. Why don't we swap over, and we'll hand the mic to Katrin to talk about the financials and the treasurer's report for the last year.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Sharon. So yeah, as Nick mentioned, we have scaled things up this year in 2024, last year, I guess it was, mostly due to the large grant that was secured, over $600,000 over a period of, I believe, 18 months. So it spans a couple fiscal years, which really was big numbers for VTGC. So in order to responsibly manage this size grant, we did adopt a robust financial policies and procedures, hired a bookkeeper. But as our statement of financial position shows, we're a really small organization. We only have about, as of the end of 2024, $16,723 in unrestricted net assets in the bank, and we added a little bit of net revenue to that at the end of 2024, so about $20,000. Actually, Nick and Sharon worked with Vermont Community Foundation to secure a line of credit so that we have that in case we have cash flow issues as we're managing this large grant, which was also super helpful. Along with that came another grant to support paying the interest on that, which we haven't accrued any interest, thankfully, because Forest Parks and Recreation really got us our reimbursement checks in a very speedy manner. So we didn't actually need to use that line of credit for a long time, which was very helpful. So thanks to Sharon for growing in her role and sort of assuming a lot of responsibility and tracking these income and expenses, especially with the grant, which is complicated. So great job there. We can go to the next slide. As far as revenue and expenses, so the Trail Accessibility Hub really represents a large portion of both the revenue and expense side. To give you an idea on the expense side, in 2023, our total expenses were about $57,000. So growing from $57,000 in 2023 to $271,000 in expenses is quite a jump from year to year. So again, great job in scaling everything up in a timely manner to sort of be able to manage this. On the revenue side, you see that Trail Accessibility Hub restricted grants, that's in that bucket. So about over $230,000 in revenue coming in. Other sources of revenue, donations, and those are actually donations from VTGC members contributing towards our legislative efforts and sort of being able to secure Maidstone for those relationships in that program there. And we'll talk more about that in the next update. So that's very helpful. In 2024, we only secured a little over $1,300 in membership revenues. So I'm really jazzed that Carolyn and others on the membership committee, Sharon, Jeff, Monica, have been really working hard to sort of re-energize the membership committee. So we are looking to grow that portion of our revenue. So please join if you're not a member. It's really important to help, support the efforts here. And then we did have a small amount of unrestricted grants, about $15,000 coming in there. So that's the summary of the revenue side. On the expenses, again, the grant represents the bulk of our expenses. And then the other biggest part of VTGC's expenses are salaries and wages, and then professional fees and consulting. So in order to get all this great work done, we need to pay and support our staff, and we added additional capacity to that through hiring consultants. So yeah, looking forward to continuing this into 2025.
Awesome. Thank you again, Katrin, for really whipping us into shape on the financial front. And if folks have questions, I didn't see any drop into the chat there, but feel free to drop them in, because Katrin is definitely the expert here when it comes to our finances. Awesome. Cool. Well, handy that Katrin brought up membership, and so we'll go ahead and pass the torch over to Carolyn to share where we're at on the membership front.
Cool, thanks, Nick. Thank you. I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet. As Nick said, this is our first year that we have operated under the committee structure, which has been, I think, really instrumental in what we've been able to accomplish as a board. So part of that was just creating the charter and making sure we're all in alignment with what we're going to be doing. We also started using the software Little Green Light, which is a really helpful membership database to try and keep who we're interacting with, who we want to interact with, organized. And Monica brought this up earlier, but Jeff and Monica have done a huge lift in cleaning up our membership data. VTGC has been around for several decades, and this is, I feel like, the most robust effort that we've had to organize and make everything a little bit more efficient. So I'm feeling really excited to hit the ground running with membership appeal strategy developments, using that membership cleanup in addition to the strategic planning process. We have our strategic planning efforts are going to be continuing throughout the summer, and I'm looking forward to collaborating with that committee and our consultant to figure out where membership fits in with those higher level efforts. Sharon was also instrumental in implementing a sliding scale model. So recognizing that a lot of our members are super teeny tiny nonprofits with not a lot of budget. So the $100 membership fee can feel steep to those smaller members. So we implemented the sliding scale model to give anywhere from the 1 to 2 volunteer nonprofits to the larger budget nonprofits to join and support VTGC in ways that make sense for them. We are working to finalize some value proposition language as well, just to be like, hello, members, here's what we are doing, here's why it's important, and just to kind of better illustrate our value to the people that we're trying to engage with. So that'll be tied with the strategic planning process as well. And just looking at 2025 so far, we have 27 members year to date. So as Katrin said, we would love for you to join if you haven't already. And that has led to the $3,725 in dues, largely thanks to the slide and scale models to those members that have larger budgets that are willing to give a little bit more. Yeah, so thanks for joining us on our journey of modernizing VTGC.
Awesome. Thank you, Carolyn. And again, a plug for anyone who is not an active member to please join and be a member, because the more members we have, the more we can accomplish, and it's helpful to have those numbers in our ranks as well. Cool. Awesome. Well, why don't we hand it over then to, I'm not sure if Tommy or Jill's going to kick us off, but I think a lot of folks mentioned their interest in the legislative activities that we've been involved in. So we'll pass it over to Tommy. and Jill to kind of talk through what we've been up to and what's on the docket a little bit for the year ahead as well.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, all. Tommy, I think I was going to jump in and just give an overall session status. Sorry, I'm at the Red Hen and trucks are going by on the road today. But just to give you an overview, the T-bill, which we had potential language in, has passed. And the FY26 budget has passed and has been signed. We're in an interesting time in the session. Normally, once the budget passed, everybody goes home. But because of the education bill, that package is not finished and they're giving the legislature more time on that. There's also a lot going on federally, and the legislature has really been waiting for the shoe to drop. We get about a third of our funding, state funding, comes from federal funds. And so there's a lot of nervousness, anxiety attached to that right now. I will say that we definitely hit a lot of headwinds with the budget this year. People are very concerned, and I haven't seen a lot of years where they're talking about $15,000 increments, but that's where we got this year. So things got very tight. And a lot of programs that looked like they were going to move forward got cut, but there is a little bit more money for Serve, Learn, and Earn. They got $500,000 in the base. This is the first time they've gotten in the base, and then they got $250,000 extra. And then there's a bill that was incorporated into the budget. It's an economic development bill where they're creating a disaster recovery loan fund, really looking at whether that disaster is the loss of federal funds or whether that disaster is flood funds, or anything like that. You will have the ability to apply for funding out of this, and it's definitely going to be, I think, helpful. Mike Marcotte led the way on this one. There's a big data privacy bill, S71, which everybody's kind of been waiting for that to move forward. It passed the Senate, but the main sponsor of the very dangerous, data privacy is very good. We want data privacy, but this bill creates a private right of action for any consumer who feels like their data has been used in the wrong way. And nonprofits are squarely in this because it has to do with how many emails you have. So we've been watching that very closely. And, there's huge changes going on the state level and the administrative level. So all of that adds to kind of tenuous moving forward. What they're saying right now is that we will not adjourn until May 30th, and then there will be a veto session around June 17th within that area. It could be a very different veto session because there isn't a veto-proof majority. And so the governor has a lot more power right now. And then they are making plans to come back for 2 weeks in September, which it happened during COVID, but other than that, it hasn't happened. Every extra week that the legislature is in, it costs $300,000. So they have to be pretty mindful. They were supposed to adjourn May 9th. So we're looking at $1 million extra just for them to be in the legislature. And so hopefully that September session is not needed. But yeah. With that, I'll turn it over to Tommy to talk specifically about our bills.
Great, thanks so much, Jill. So relevant legislation this year that VTGC was definitely a part of. First up, S4, which is the maintenance of legal trails, also goes in that second dot so quickly for those who weren't familiar, S4 was an actual legal trails bill to not only define maintenance abilities of legal trails in the state of Vermont, but also to help municipalities take care of authorization and how they select who and what types of recreation can use it. So one of the big changes when S4 was originally written was they dropped things like select board and just put legislative body. So in the end, if you had a strong and highly used select board that had like a rec committee, they could turn it over to that. Or if you had some smaller towns, they left it to the select board. It was um, pushed around a lot. The Senate liked it. It had favorable stuff. And when it made crossover into the House, it got stalled there, particularly around some language. So then it broke out into that second bullet, H488. And when it went that way, it was being discussed and looked at. And so it went to what they call conference of committee. So members of the Senate Transportation and members of the House Committee worked together to try to get it passed by rewriting it together. It did not. So it is sitting currently, as we speak. They're taking testimony right now as well in House Committee on Transportation. So the sticking point for this, from what we're hearing when we're in there, as well as, Jill's been on the ground listening a lot in the hallways outside of it, is that there is a current legal case going on, and that tends to be where the folks in the committee are having their struggles, which is something that we've had legislative counsel speak to, we've spoken to, other groups have spoken to, and so now we're at a point of waiting. The committee was presented with three options with this bill, just so everybody knows what they are. They could leave it as is, which is as it was written. They could completely just get rid of it, scrap it, and it goes back to the drawing board. There is a middle option of accepting the language but putting a later effective date, meaning they can push it out. Really, what some of the folks are saying is they want to see how the legal case finishes. Others are saying we should clear it up and codify it now. So that's where that sticking point is. Yesterday, both Nick and Jeff spoke in front of House Committee. They testified. They did a great job. It was, again, as I shared with our board, but I'll share with everybody here, it was so good. I had about 4 different groups text and reach out saying, hey, that was really good testimony. That really helped clear a lot of things up. So I just want to also share with all of you that when we do go in and testify, we're getting really great results. So thank you again, Nick and Jeff, for your part with yesterday. Moving on, we had 2 bills. Oh, no, stay on the same side. Sorry, I'm just different bullet points. H147, S79 were bills that came out they were discussed a lot this summer and were written about the recreational trail compensation study. And this was, again, looking at how can we better show the contributions that our trail systems make based on Vermont being 4.9% of the gross domestic product coming from recreation. How do we better look at supporting landowners that are participating in allowing us to have that recreational capability? So a lot was going on with that. We had some favorable legislators help write this. I know Jill, I know Abby from Kingdom Trails were pretty integral in the creation of this bill. It got stuck. It took testimony, but then it just, as they say, got to the wall. But Nick and I recently had a couple different other interested groups outside of Trails and Greenway reach out, wanting to put their support behind this type of study and to kind of collaborate and maybe come back to it. So we anticipate in the next few weeks here to be working with different groups to look at this compensation study. What does that mean? How do we, again, support the fact that about 3/4 of maybe a little more of our trail system sit on privately owned land, and how we can support privately owned land being recreational usage. The miscellaneous DMV bill, we had some language in there, both from VTGC members, but also as a whole that passed, that went through. That's great. And that a lot of it had to do with maintenance, safety, and then particularly VASA, we had a statutory definition change. But when we go in and talk, particularly this year with Senate Committee on Transportation, they had a lot of side questions, particularly around the work that we're doing. So we're excited that during the miscellaneous DMV bill, we were able to share all of our thoughts and things here with VTGC. wanted to share with everybody so you know where we were. We've testified in both the committees of transportation in the House and the Senate. Nick had time in natural resources, spoke to that group. He was not only introducing VTGC to them, but also that was our time for the compensation study. And one other thing that didn't make the bullet point here before I get to that national one, which is the tariff issues. Abby, I know, was part of a group and did some representation when Senator Welch was doing the tour and related to how tariffs were affecting recreation, both as a maintenance and like cost prohibitive issue, but also to the visitation and how it was affecting Canadian travel. So VTGC was represented at some of those roundtables that Senator Welch was doing across the state. I was invited, unfortunately couldn't make that one, but they did a good job reaching out, and we're also keeping our close eyes on national issues. As Jill said, with the committees doing their final bits here, we're keeping a really close eye on this H488 language. It is pretty crucial to us, the legal trail battle, and we'll see what comes of that end of session stuff. I do, again, want to reiterate, we did a lot of work with Jill and Maidstone and some really great work, and they not only helped get us in front of a lot of committees, but again, got the message across in other ways. So, you know, if you haven't been to the State House, there's a lot that goes on outside of committees. We work with different folks who also provide testimony. So Jill was integral with that. I know several of us have been in there doing, you know, hallway chats, if you will. So just thanks to anybody who came and supported that. And then I know, Jill, you want to touch on Outdoor Rec Day again, which was a big success for us, which is the next slide, Nick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tommy. For anybody who did not make it to Outdoor Rec Day, this was our second year of doing it, and we had 95 registrants. We have a lot of partners that we do this with, which I think is always a great way to come in, right? Last year, as part of Outdoor Rec Day, we had a lot of testimony all across the building, actually, in Commerce and House and Senate Ag and Senate Economic Development, I think. So we really had a presence. And I will just say that, you know, the goal here is really for, if people are talking about anything to do with recreation, if they're working on any legislation around it, if they're talking about trails, land use related to it, we want them to think of the Trails and Greenways Council. There are a lot of people that still don't know who you are, but I think we are really socializing who you are, and the breadth of the council is something that really hits all lawmakers because there's constituents, you know, across the state. So thanks for people that come and support this. It's a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. And, you know, we just really want to make sure that people know this is an advocacy powerhouse and that you all show up and are ready to do the work. And I think I just want to echo what Tommy said. Yesterday, I heard from, you know, a couple lawmakers, so I had to leave a little bit early, that they were like, this is exactly what we were looking for. We needed to hear this. And I did hear this morning that they will be voting out the DMV bill and deciding on the legal trails component by Friday. So it's moving. Thanks a lot.
And so one more plug, Nick. We meet Mondays during session over Zoom, where we get a nice update from Jill, and we do some planning and prep. So anybody's welcome at those. You can always ask for that Zoom link. It slows down a little bit, obviously in summer out of session, but during session every Monday around the lunch hour, a group of us get together. So if you want to just hear and know what's going on, that's a great spot. Or if you want to come and help us plan and prepare how we navigate the State House, that would be a great time to do so.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you both for leading the charge on this front. And yeah, it's cool to see all the progress this past year. Cool. With that, why don't we hand it over to Claire with our friends at Forest Parks and Rec.
Thanks, Nick. I just want to, if you go back, just go back one, because I put my email on there. I can also put it in the chat at the end. I'm going to go through this really fast and furious because there's a lot of updates. So if you have specific questions that we don't get to, please feel free to email me at claire.pulfis@vermont.gov. And I also just will note that I'm joined by my colleagues here in the room, Becca Washburn and Jackie Dagger, and online with Lauren Pyle. So if there are questions that are more pertinent to their program areas, I'll just send it to them, but I'm just going to do all the updates because, like I said, fast and furious. So if you go to the next slide, thank you. So starting with some of our overall statewide initiatives of the last year and going forward to the next year, our biggest success story is the launch of Move Forward Together Vermont, which was a almost 2-year planning process that created a vision for our outdoor recreation future. This also serves as our statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan and our statewide trails plan, both of which allow us to receive federal funding for recreation in Vermont. And it also is the basis for the VOREC, the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative Action Plan. We are now in implementation phase. So the plan lays out that the vision for outdoor recreation in Vermont is to build vibrant communities through outdoor recreation. And it does so with priority actions in 3 different kind of buckets or themes: stewardship, wellness, and economic development. And then across all those themes, there's a focus on climate resilience and equity. That's a very quick overview of what we're trying to do with this. And if you want more information, I put the QR code to lead to the Move Forward Together Vermont website. And on that website, you can sign up for more updates because we are launching with launching implementation. We are engaging all of our partners, including Vermont Trails and Greenways Council, but also many of you who might be interested. So if you go to the website, you can sign up to find out more of how we're actually getting this plan going on the ground. The next, which was maybe previously mentioned, is that we are modernizing, starting a process to modernize the Vermont trail system. Right now, there is an RFP out asking for contractor support. The Vermont trail system is created by Vermont statute to support an interconnected trail system across Vermont. And it is administered by FPR and with advice from the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. And we've been working for a long time on trying to figure out how to meet the modern needs of the recreation and trails community through the Vermont trail system. And we're really excited to launch this process. We have a technical advisory committee made up of folks from the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council, as well as other stakeholders. And it's a 3-phase process. The first is to compile best practices for trails in Vermont across all of the activity types. The second is to really take a deep dive into the Vermont trail system, the membership and application process to see how BMPs can be better integrated into that and how we can improve that. And then the third is with the recommendation that the technical advisory committee will make based on the second part of the phase, what resources would be required to implement this recommendation. We're hoping that we're planning for this to be a July 1 to July 1 contract with this contractor support and then the technical advisory committee advice. So in just over a year, we hope to have the recommendation for the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation. The Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, which Jackie here is the program manager for, is really taking the lead on implementing Move Forward Together Vermont within the greater community, working with partners like you guys and like the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance and so many other partners engaged in those 3 themes of stewardship, wellness, and economic development. And Jackie's really taking the lead on those implementation sessions that I already mentioned. There's also this really exciting project with the Vermont Department of Tourism and Marketing, and it's called the Local Level Outdoor Recreation Impact Project.
Economic Impact Project. We need a different name.
Okay, it needs a new name, but what it's doing is it looks at how local communities are benefiting from outdoor recreation, the outdoor recreation economy, and figuring out how to support that across the state and even more communities. And there's 4 communities, right? 5.
So there's a couple of things that we're doing. We're assessing the information that exists and identifying gaps. We're creating a toolkit that communities can use at the local level to assess the value that outdoor recreation provides locally and within their region. And this summer, we're going to be piloting that toolkit in 4 individual communities and 1 regional asset. And we're still figuring out where exactly that's going to happen, but we're actively inviting communities right now. And we expect by the end of September that the toolkit will be complete, and we'll be looking to leverage opportunities to reach local communities to start using that.
Great source. Thanks, Jackie. The other things that VORC is focused on is tracking the impacts of federal policy changes on the outdoor recreation economy, and has been working with many of you on that. Jackie's been working with many of you on that. And then there's also the steering committee, which is the advisory committee for VORC. There's some long-standing members have decided to step down in June, which is the transfer. So there will be new steering committee members coming on, which is, you know, like with anything, like we really appreciate all the work the steering committee members who are leaving have done, and are also excited to have like go into our next phase of VORC. So there will be more about that coming up. The last statewide initiative is Act 59, which is the Community Resilience and Biodiversity Protection Act. Right now, the folks that are working on this with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board and the Agency of Natural Resources are about soon to launch the planning for the conservation plan that's part of that act. And my understanding is that there's meetings that will be coming up for feedback. And so we'll also, of course, be letting VTGC know about it, but that's something to keep an eye on as well. Next slide. So getting a little bit more specific into our recreation grants program, we have 2 grant programs currently, or 2 primary grant programs currently in process, the Recreational Trails Program and the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Yes, Act 59 is the 30 by 30 bill. Yeah, it's the same thing, yeah. And so those are both in process. They're at different points of the process. Both of the application phase is complete though, and we're in the next phases. In terms of federal funding, of course, we are following the federal funding changes really closely. As of now, we haven't heard any indication that the federal funding for recreation is changing. I think the primary impacts that we're seeing right now is the loss of federal employees who are working on these programs, which then leads to delays in processing and delays in questions being answered. And like we're regularly, unfortunately, getting you know, the sad emails of we've enjoyed working for you but we have to leave. Even just got one yesterday. So they're continually coming, and it's really hard as colleagues. You know, we work for the state, they work for the federal government, of course, but like we've worked with these people for a long time, and it's hard personally, and it will continue to be really hard professionally with impacts to communities that we're already seeing. We are planning, I don't have this on there, but we are planning a criteria update for RTP to match the Move Forward Together Vermont. That's happening this summer, and we'll be bringing it to VTGC as the advisors for that program in the late summer. With the VORC Community Grant Program, we have not received any further funding on that program. So that is still being like that has always been one-time funded by the legislature, and we did not receive any funding in this round, in this budget. But the really cool thing about the VOR Community Grant Program is that, it's been a year now since the 2023 grants came out, and more than that, since the 2022 grants, and those were our big $5+ million grant projects. And it's just so cool to see all the great work that's happening across the state. Just like for us, it's like one of the like great joys of our work is to see the good work all of you are doing. And we're working on ways to better tell those stories and share that impact. And that's on our agenda for a meeting later today. So more on that. And then the last grants update, which is really exciting, and I left it till the end, is you can see this map. We now have all of our grant investments mapped across our 3 major grant programs, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the VOR Community Grant Program, and the Recreational Trails Program. What you see in front of you is the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Since 1965 has funded all of those places across Vermont. And if you go to that QR code, you can see all of the maps. Right now we have them separate and we're hoping to put them together as well. But it's just really cool to see. And I think particularly with a very decades long investments in the state, I went to some of my local parks. I had no idea that they were LWCF parks, and they were. So it's just really cool to see, and I recommend checking it out and seeing what in your community has received this funding, and maybe be inspired for future grant proposals. Okay, next slide. So this is my last slide. So, but another really important component of what we do for recreation in Vermont is our state lands provide critical recreation opportunities. We've been working a lot in improving our processes and guidance on state lands. We launched what we call the Rec Eco Guidelines, which are guidelines for how to plan and build trails on A&R lands to balance both ecological resources and recreational needs. We also updated the recreation project review process in alignment with the Rec Eco Guidelines, and also trying to make it a more transparent, clear process for all of our recreation partners who work with us on state lands recreation management. Those are really exciting. And then we're also really focused on improving our long-range management planning process, which is really the work of our lands admin program manager, Hannah Phillips, as well as many others across the department. We have a rule that we put out for kind of a version of scoping last year, and we are planning to put out the rule for public comment, the draft rule for public comment this summer. So that will be coming. And if you want to be added to the statewide list to receive updates on long-range management plans, you should email me. You can also just check the website, which is what's linked at that QR code for all upcoming long-range management plans, as well as this rule that's coming. And what the rule does is that it provides the kind of scaffolding of how we do management planning on state lands. And what that means is really how we manage our state lands. And so it applies for all the types of management we do, whether it's timber management or wildlife habitat management, or recreation management. But obviously for people interested in recreation, it provides the scaffolding for then what creates the long-range management plans. We do have some long-range management plans in process and some recently signed. That was really exciting, many years of work, decades actually, on some of them. So we recently, the Worcester Range Management Unit plan was signed. We also had 2 amendments go through, the Willoughby State Forest Amendment to add more trails for horseback riding, or designate more trails for horseback riding in Willoughby State Forest. And then the Mount Mansfield Amendment, which allows for the updating of the Goodell House, which is a historic structure for use as a all-season recreation hut. So those all passed. And then in process is the J State Forest Plan, which I think just closed their scoping. And so that will now be, all the staff will be working on the assessments, and then that will go back out for public comment when all of that is drafted. The last thing with lands admin is that we are adding a lands planner position coming up in the next month. So if this is something you're interested in, keep track on success factors, the state employment website. The lands planner position will be working on updating some of our big land unit plans in the Northeast and the Southwest regions, and we're really excited about that. The last thing is that we're working on a policy to update our biking policy to include e-bikes, and that will be going out for public comment as well this summer. So if you want to be notified by email of all of these things, email me and you can be added to the statewide list. Some of you are on it already. And if you just want to check in regularly, check out that website. I think that's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire. And I'll note too that some of the updates you mentioned regarding like LRMP stuff, and many of these are communicated through the VTGC newsletter as well. Not that it hurts to get informed from multiple angles, but those are the kind of important happenings that we definitely make sure we communicate in the VTGC news.
Yeah, and almost all of them are things that we also go to the board for advice and feedback on. So
awesome. Cool. Well, lots happening in the FPR world. Thanks that was as you mentioned, quite a whirlwind, but I'm sure folks and your emails now in the chat follow up if they've got extra questions, or they're welcome to add them here now, because we're in a minute going to go to kind of a more open input from folks. So cool. So I think I'm going to run through this because, as noted, the main function of the Trails Committee, as in the last couple of months, has been to advise and be a part of the technical advisory committee that's taking part in this Vermont Trail System modernization, which Claire well described a minute ago, so won't go into too much detail there. But we have a couple of folks from the Trails Committee here, Mariah and Keenan, among others. Just kind of the core function there is, and the committee itself, is really brings the expertise from folks that have deep backgrounds in managing trail systems or trail building, design, that type of thing. So kind of akin to the legislative committee, if folks have interest in being a part of this, we're certainly always open to bringing even folks from outside the board to participate on these committees. But really over the foreseeable future, in the recent past, and I guess just over the last couple of months, we've helped kind of support the scoping of how the trail system modernization project will take place. I'm co-chairing that technical committee with Claire as the VTGC chair, and then over the next few months, we'll really be helping guide the work as that process takes place. So very clear kind of scope of work for the Trails Committee over the next few months, and excited to see, knowing that one of our core responsibilities is as an advisor on the VTS, excited to see a system or a program that hasn't seen much change and for a very long time be brought into sort of modern management and be much more valuable. So basically very much a stay tuned, and if you're interested in being more engaged, let us know, because again, we're always looking for folks with active interest to be on these committees. Cool. Not seeing any other questions or comments in the chat. So what we thought we would do is we've got 20 or so folks attending. It doesn't have to be, it can be anybody, including board members or partners with questions. But we thought about just a useful opportunity to do a couple things. One is to kind of hear from folks we don't normally hear from. The board gets together monthly and has a chance to kind of discuss a lot of these issues. But perhaps also kind of take a step back, and knowing that this is an annual meeting, think through kind of the questions we thought are orbited around kind of needs, challenges, and opportunities. But even in a more broader context, if folks have things they think are important to kind of either ask, point out, or just put on the radar, knowing that we don't necessarily take the opportunity to kind of step back and think about things on that more kind of year-long time frame. So I'll talk through the questions in just a sec, and we'll see. And I would just encourage folks to raise hands if they want to jump in, and we'll go around the horn. The one thing I will note, and we copied it here too, is that it's been talked about. We have the conference that Sharon noted, the annual conference on parks, trails, and recreation coming up in October. That's going to be a really important opportunity for, we hope, as many folks from the trail community as possible to get together in person. The conversations and a lot of what we're able to talk about then really helps shape the year ahead, knowing that it's hard to beat that opportunity. But so keeping in mind that that's on the at least coming up in the fall. But we still again did want to take a moment to hear from folks if there are needs that you feel kind of are not really being addressed by the work that we've talked about that has been done and where we're kind of headed toward, which I'll jump into in a minute. Challenges that you're really concerned about in the year ahead, and then opportunities if you think that that the Trails Agreements Council really should be more in tune with as we look forward. So with that, be great if I don't think I can see this, if folks have comments, questions, if they just want to weigh in with their hand up would be great. And board members are welcome to jump into if we don't have peanut gallery is. Well, I had one, and I'm happy to go first and just kind of express at least something that kind of goes into the challenges arena, just listening to folks and reflecting on all the work we've done and the work ahead. I think it's amazing to see how much progress is being made. It was evident in FPR slides. I think it's evident in the work that we've been doing to both professionalize the Trails and Greenways Council, as well as think about ways to address the issues regarding legislative opportunities around sort of landowner recognition, things like that. It's also, I guess, it's more of just a challenge, or a concern might be too strong a word, but just a voice. We also know that there are forces around us moving very quickly as well in terms of things shaping the nature of recreation, and the profile of recreation. Trail-based recreation has increased so much. Maybe I'll frame it as hope. I'm really hopeful that we can keep up with that that profile. We know there are towns that are reckoning with or struggling with how to kind of manage and guide recreation in their communities, looking in some cases to the council and the statewide bodies to provide more direction and resources. And I think we're trying to do that through the stuff that we've talked about. But just kind of, I'm listening to and reflecting on the kind of report back. I'm more hopeful, I think, even than I would be previously, that we can do that. But just kind of a comment that I think reflecting on it, Chair, I'm deeply grateful for everyone's time and energy they put into this, because I think we have an obligation to keep up, knowing that there's a lot of things in motion that we need to keep up with. So just a comment more than anything. And I see a couple hands up. I think the first was Tommy, perhaps.
Sure. One of the things too, I think that would be helpful for us going forward, and for folks that are joining us that aren't on the board and are interested, is that on the policy and advocacy side, it would be helpful for us to have a list of folks that could be willing to go in and speak and testify in front of committees based on either your expertise in a related organization, association, or a particular field. One of the things that helped us, again, we bring up yesterday, having, when Jeff signed on and has that municipality background, that was very critical to this bill. It would just be one of those things that we could always, send Nick, myself, or other folks that go in very regularly, but the committees and the State House like to see multiple people, different folks. So if you have interest ever of going in and possibly presenting testimony or representing VTGC, let us know so we can get your information kind of like on an on-call thing. And then the other thing that's been helpful and we're happy to do is that if at any point you see a bill or something that you want to address but may not want to go in, we have templates and we have ways to do written testimony, and we can get you in touch with those folks. I know I did that with Monica this morning for concerns that the Horse Council has. So just as those things go forward, definitely reach out to us at the board, we want to help and be as ready as we can to get ready for next session. It's not too far away.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Tommy. That's, I think, a great idea to get folks just to know who to contact. And I think there's also can be I've heard from folks like the idea of who haven't testified before, that it being quite intimidating, understandably. And I think just encouraging folks that, and Jeff, as was noted, was I think his first time testifying yesterday, and hopefully was not as intimidating as it sounded, because he certainly knocked it out of the park. So and the legislators love to hear from, I think, folks in our community generally. So great point. Abby, I see you've got your hand up, it looks like.
Yeah, I just thinking about like pressing needs. We're still in the session, I know, but it sounds like our, study for potential landowner recognition is left on the wall and not going to pass. And I just kind of see, that's now been a few years where like VTGC is like going after something. Like last year it was the economic impact study, and then it just kind of falls. And, I know that I'm communicating pretty consistently with all of my private landowners. So I get them pumped. I have them writing testimony even and writing their representatives, and then it falls flat again. And I just like have the ongoing worry that if this keeps happening, like they'll just be like, well, what are you doing, Abby? And so I'm wondering, I had this idea, now VOREC under Jackie's leadership is like taken hold of the economic impact study from last year and like pushing it forward through the agencies and not through the legislator, which is amazing. And I'm thrilled about this. And I'm wondering if, I know I could write a paragraph up to my own landowners that, hey, look at this, got some traction from like last year's session, and now VOREC's spearheading this. It's something's actually happening, and I'm wondering, so I know I can do that on my own, but I'm wondering if like Vermont Trails and Greenway could like write a blog post or something about highlighting this effort, that how it came from some of the legislative effort in the past. And that just might give some hope or have a little bit more clout than me just writing my own landowners, and if it's worth bringing to the forefront and just celebrating.
I think that's a really good idea. And I think it's worth noting, Tommy alluded to as well, and you can jump in here, Tommy, but we've got, already have other organizations who are interested in partnering, like view this as an important priority, the landowner recognition. And so I think, yeah, something that I think it's worth when the session closes, hopefully we can highlight a win with the legal trails piece, fingers crossed still on that front. But then being able to communicate that we're in the middle of a biennium and progress has been made, and there were points on, or at least, we're not done pushing for this to get passed in the, in this next session, even if it didn't get through this year. So that's a really good call out that we should put on our radar as soon as the session closes, something that communicates the positive momentum and also talks about that this is still very much an active, because I feel similarly, like I'm ready for some wins in terms of, it takes a long time to create champions and get progress, but also hopeful that, and we've heard from, this is definitely not done, knowing that we're only halfway through the biennium, but that's a really good call out. Other questions or comments, particularly from folks that, don't join us regularly? Yeah, Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on Abby's comment a little bit. I have felt that our e-news is great, and it's good to get the word out about what's going on in the state. But I think some original writing would be really helpful. And when we started the e-news, I would write a little blurb or co-write it with Nick. But I think it would help us with marketing, like what we're doing and who we are and why we're important, if we could highlight some of these key topics that are out there, and not just from like, here's the facts about what legal trails are, but here's our take on it. Like the press release was great, that was super helpful to get out there, but I think there's other issues that could help us just market what we do. Kind of that sales pitch, so people could see more clearly the role we're playing at the statewide level.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And I think something worth, especially as we get to what's clearly a close on this, part of the biennium, kind of a good opportunity to reflect on from a policy side about how we can comment and provide some content on what we've been working on and what should be, or we feel are priorities for the community. Joe, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks for having me here today. It's great to hear about all the awesome work that you're all doing at the state. I just wanted to share, a few years ago, the center received a grant from NRCS in Vermont for money specifically for Vermont-based trail organizations or municipalities doing work to decrease erosion on trails. Let's see, at this point, 15 grants have been issued. We have a little bit more money left. We're going to be doing a third round of RFPs that'll be public pretty soon. I actually have a meeting with NRCS tomorrow. The permitting process for some of the projects and the reviews have taken some time. So I can't share the idea that I'm pitching with NRCS tomorrow, but it's to be very, very tactical, hopefully very quick to implement small grants that hopefully can go to a lot of trail organizations. We've got about $75,000 left in this pot of money to distribute. I'll send an email out to you all as soon as I've got go ahead to issue a public RFP for that, and encourage you to share it with VTGC members. It will be a very quick turnaround. We have a deadline from the feds for later this year to have all of that money expended. So just kind of keep your eyes and ears open. We'll certainly we'll make that public on our newsletter as well, but I'll happily share that with you all and encourage you to apply.
Great. Thanks, Joe. That's helpful to know. And we'll keep that on the radar for sure. So stay tuned. As we know from our surveys and many of conversations with folks, funding is always a short or a need, and particularly that kind of work. So that's great to know. Any other, beyond the questions here, if not big picture, if folks have questions or comments about any of the content we covered before we talk about, kind of start to at least look forward and talk board folks, and then also what's on the docket for the year ahead, just a quick recap. Not seeing any hands. So again, I think as we mentioned at the top of the conversation, if you do have, make sure you're part of that. You're on the e-news if you're listening to this after the fact, because that is where we communicate everything going on, as well as we post our monthly board meetings, which are open. And if you have questions, ideas, topics, you're always welcome to share those with us, either at the info@vermonttgc.org email, or usually there's links through our newsletter. And we're happy to integrate those into those monthly board conversations. So this is not a once and done or one and done opportunity for input and comments. But yeah, feel free to let us know at any time. We really are, the purpose of the council is to speak for and on behalf and communicate with our members. So please consider that an open channel. Great. Well, why don't we go ahead, and I think we'll move on to talk about board elections for the year ahead. And I think I'm handing this to Mariah, I imagined. I think you're the chair of that committee.
Yes, I am. And I think in the notes that we were going to have Katrin read the bylaws.
Ah, great.
Oh, wow. I guess I missed that note.
Or do we need to read the bylaws, or I guess, yeah,
I don't
that's
know
fair.
if we do.
Yeah.
Read the bylaws. So
In terms of
related
who's-
to
yeah, the
the
positions we
membership
have to
of
elect.
VTGC board?
Yeah, I don't actually know where that note came from. I guess the question is, do we need to read the bylaws? Do folks want to know what our bylaws are in terms of the makeup of the board?
They're posted on our website. I think we
Okay.
can probably, note that we have constraints. We've operated within those constraints, probably is sufficient.
So this is our board slate as proposed, with an opening for a floor nomination for a statewide rep.
Also, just quick update that I'm no longer with STP. That was last year. So just
I changed it. Maybe I changed it on a different version. Sorry, I just changed it actually when we started the meeting.
Yeah, well, we'll go ahead and change it live so that it's in
Okay.
front of the. It is. Oh, you know what you did, Mariah? It just hadn't updated. I opened it up. It was already changed. Hopefully, look at that.
Okay. Apologies.
I hope that's no. That was on my end. I just opened up before. Yeah, it should be good.
So I think before we propose this slate, we want to open it up to nominations from the floor for a statewide rep.
If there are any. I don't know. Let's see.
I'm not seeing Greg Western running yet. Or Keegan, but I already reeled Keegan in on some other stuff. Greg, would you have any interest and willingness to rejoin the board?
I am not a statewide organization.
Oh,
what that's worth. Only if needed, but I'm interested to serve on committees if there's a need there.
There's definitely a need there. We can circle back around about that for sure. Keegan, any interest, willingness, ability, in time?
That all important words to factor into this conversation. I would be happy to serve on the board, but don't have a ton of capacity to give outside of my already assigned trail management committee activity. So if folks are willing to entertain a board member who can't do much more than he's already doing, then somebody could nominate me to that.
I, for one, would add, I would be really great to have Green Mountain Club back on the board from just a voice standpoint, and Keegan even pretty engaged in our meetings and on the Trails Committee. I feel like that's about the threshold of what we expect from board members. So I would, for one, would be happy to second a nomination for Keegan, but again, I wouldn't say it would be an increase in your already engagement. And again, it would be great to represent Green Mountain Club, have Green Mountain Club represented on the board.
And I would second that, but Keegan, I'm also your friend.
We don't want to volunteer
you
you to do anything either, Keegan.
I'm happy to do it. Mike's gonna kick me in the shins when I tell him I volunteered myself, but it's okay.
We promise to keep it light. Be on the Trails Committee. Great. Well, I think we had a nomination and a second, which was me and then Mariah. Any other comments before we propose the pictured slate with the addition of Keegan Tierney from the Green Mountain Club into the statewide rep position? I'm not seeing any. Let's see. And I think the best way to do this, in terms of if I'm going to go back screen, if everybody, so then I'll look for a vote of all those in attendance to approve the slate as proposed, with just even a thumbs up, like using their either Zoom icon or their thumb physically, if that's easier. Sharon has a question, or is it a thumbs up or question?
I don't think I can vote. I just want to put a marker in that if we want to continue working in the accessibility realm, we really should have somebody on the board that represents that community and does have a disability.
I think that's a great comment. And I think we talked to the board meeting earlier today about the desire for, and this is the reason we didn't pass that language, but to create potentially the designations of these groups even were very focused on who the council's membership was 20 or 30 years ago. And so thinking about creating that as a desire, I think building off our also intent to set up and have a DEI committee, but then also thinking about board representation. So I think that's an important observation, Sharon, and one we should definitely pursue. And fortunately, better or worse, we have every year the council recycles and does the board nominations, so there's a pretty fresh slate. But I think that's log that. Mindful of who we have presently, I go back to one more just to make sure we capture it. Thumbs up either from folks in attendance or for members if you indeed approve the slate as proposed. That's at minimum a quorum. Great. Excellent. Well, welcome, Keegan, officially. And I'll go back here. Great. I think then our last, we had a couple minutes here left. Just wanted to touch on it. I think a lot of this stuff was touched on as we went through in terms of kind of what's ahead, but just wanted to note a couple of things. One is that we're still working, well, a couple of things on the organizational side. We now have these tiered membership levels, and so really working to expand the participation. And as both from a financial standpoint, it's great, but honestly, it makes up kind of a small component of the revenue from the council. The more important thing is to grow the number of organizations involved. So big push this year, and huge thanks to Jeff and Monica, as noted, for helping clean up our data and a lot of our historical data. A lot of our outreach will focus on just growing the tent as much as possible. And hopefully through things like at work on legal trails, we can attract even more municipalities and other organizations to participate. So big work on that front. I think the most exciting thing, without question, is the strategic planning effort. We have a retreat for the board planned in later June. That'll be a pretty vital opportunity to help shape and guide. I think will be the council's at least first ever that we're aware of strategic planning exercise. We've done a lot of this, I wouldn't say flying by the seat of our pants, but I think Sharon said building the ship as we fly it. And so this will hopefully be an opportunity to design a bit more of the ship for at least the next couple of years. So it's super exciting, and stay tuned for updates on that front. Really excited. Obviously, I think the external efforts that Claire touched on, really eager to be engaged in both Move Forward Together Vermont and Act 59, the Vermont Conservation Strategy Initiative 30 by 30 work. Those are going to be dramatic shaping of Vermont's recreation landscape. So council plans to be actively involved in that front. On the legislative side of things, as was highlighted by Abby, we definitely need to do a recap and kind of where we are with the priorities that we had last year and really focus on it. And as is noted here, this summer we'll be really looking at how we hone and double down or revise kind of the work, particularly on recreation access recognition, the impact study on the economic impact work that Jackie noted, kind of also paying close eye how we can be engaged and help leverage that to be most useful as possible for our members. But really the big focus summer, while it is the off season for the legislature, in some ways it's the most important time to really refine strategy, develop legislative language, that type of thing. So we plan to be pretty active, doing everything we can to get to actually put some points on the board in terms of legislative by the end of this biennium. And then programmatic, the biggest, which Sharon talked through, lots to come. We were about halfway through the number of assessments, but we have a ton of not just on the ground assessments planned for this year and season with the Trail Accessibility Hub, but this is really when we begin to, we will be launching what is the digital hub itself, and all those resources, materials, really how we can best advance the trail community and trail accessibility. So that's going to be a huge effort over the next couple of months, and as well as sort of identifying, as Sharon described, what the sustainability plan is for that to persist and how it should persist into the future. So a lot of exciting things were touched on looking ahead. If you are interested in engaging any of these, particularly through our committees, if you're either listening now or after the fact, please reach out. And please, if you're an organization with any relevance to the council, please consider being a member, because membership, again, whether it is vital when we go in to be able to speak to the extent of the trail stewardship community that we represent. That was a very quick flyby of what's up ahead. And we've got a minute or two if folks have any other questions, comments before we adjourn. I'll open it back up before we wrap up for the day. All right, well, not seeing anything there, I will, again, huge thanks to the staff, Sharon, the board, FPR partners. It's really phenomenal to work with so many folks that with deep love for trail-based recreation, and also just the amount of commitment that folks have brought. So thank you all for joining today. Thank you all for your work in outdoor recreation, and looking forward to more success to come in the year ahead. Huge thanks to everybody.
Thanks for leading. Great meeting, Nick.
See you all out on the trail.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.